doing something different today. This is sort of like a mock-up to my practice TED Talk. And I know they like them to last right around 18 minutes. So we'll go from there. And I'm right about at the 29-minute mark left. So, yeah, my topic is what I learned from living in a tent for 2 years in North Carolina. Okay, whenever I did this, I want to say right out the bat, one thing I learned real fast whenever I was in the middle of doing this is not to play the victim and to stay out of my own head. I did a lot of service. I did service for the Salvation Army. I don't like saying this that much because I think the true mark of humility is when you do something good is you really don't brag about it. And to be honest with you, that's one thing that gets on my nerves a lot. But I try not to judge because everybody is wired different. But it was a unique experience whenever you're living in a tent and you're serving people at the Salvation Armies. And I used to do supper a lot. And I did other services while there. Like for instance, I worked out a kid who was living at an Oxford house. And I wound up doing another service for him through the recovery world. And it's sort of weird whenever you're sponsoring somebody and you feel better mentally than they do when they're living indoors. So, with that being said, that was quite unique. And because of my pro wrestling / MMA career, I fought MMA a little bit back in 2003. I learned real early again about intestinal fortitude. And because of me sponsoring that kid, which as far as I know, as of now, that he stayed clean and sober, as far as I know. And I'd stay clean and sober, so I basically, it all worked out. So, but because of some of my earlier stuff, I learned a lot about intestinal fortitude, which carried me straight on through. So now, and also, because of him, I met somebody and I got really deep into meditation. And I started studying alchemy. And I started listening to guys like Sadhguru in India, which is possibly the most peaceful guy I've ever seen. Now, he does get a little rowdy. I've seen him participate in athletic events on YouTube in India. But his voice is what I want to be like. It's like, if I had a picture of sanctification besides Jesus, he would be the other picture. So, and I got to studying the chakras real hard. I got to listen. I got really open-minded. Now, granted, whenever I was serving at the Salvation Army, I forgot to tell you that I was also a soldier at the Salvation Army. And I was making coffee for Sunday morning, for Sunday school, every Sunday. And at our Tuesday night Bible study. Like I said, I found out that was the best thing for me, was to do as much service as I can. And try not to be, and don't be a nuisance to the community. And I also found out to be nice to the policemen in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I found out the nicer I was to the policemen, the better treatment I got. Now, granted, that's was when Baltimore and Ferguson was going on. And there was a lot of people in the South who are in poverty who was playing the victim. I found out, for me, the best thing to do was to do service and do not play the victim. And I learned I could talk all kinds of stuff. At one time, I was trying to start Celebrate Recovery whenever I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina at the Salvation Army. And I decided not to because I wanted to go back to the basics of recovery. And because of open-mindedness, I learned to listen to all point of views, which has even helped today because I could have took, shots at Paul Ryan on Twitter about, not following along, but I looked at the thing all the way through. So, and I know any good businessman does not make a decision from the hip. So, with that being said, I think our whole world's got generated by, has started living up to the point where every decision's a split second. Our whole life is fast paced, which through meditation I learned how to slow down, how to enjoy the moment, to live in the now, because the now is the only thing that really matters. When it gets right down to it, I always ask my question. I've asked this question for 2 years. Am I all right now? Right now in this moment, am I okay? Do I got what I need? Yes. As long as I can answer that, I have enough contentedness where I can get through today. So, sometimes the materialistic world, and I've been guilty of that. When I lived in Fort Lauderdale, and I had access to a lot of people, and I worked around some celebs at Joe Robbie Stadium. I wanted, I was always in that I won stage, and it was different. But down there, it's a different atmosphere than up north in a way. You get that island atmosphere. So, but as long as I stayed in the now and was content with now, I was okay. And I don't, everybody, a lot of people use the serenity prayer in and out of recovery for peace in the moment. But for me, I found out if I ask the question, am I all right now? I could get through the moment. That moment. And I lived through a winter storm. I lived through a tropical storm that hit Fayetteville outside, and I made it through. And as long as I was breathing, I had to ask myself over and over again, am I all right now? So, I found out also that I've learned, especially the last 2 years, by reading and by some other people's examples that it's not exactly a good thing to say the word I too much. Now, I am is alright as long as it's followed by something positive. But it comes back to what Aleister Crowley, which is another way my open-mindedness helped in the last 2 years, where I read a bunch of stuff. I read a lot of stuff just to get me by a lot of times. And in the 8 lectures of yoga, I learned that Aleister Crowley came up with a weird method on, saying I. And, where you basically cut yourself or somebody punches you every time you say I. But I didn't go to that extremes. I just by reading about that, I got more aware about it, how many times I say the word I. So, every time I started talking, whenever I had to give example of stuff I learned, well, I always would say, well, for me, I got to do this. For me, I got to read a lot. And I found out not saying I so much takes me out of my ego. And I'm actually a little bit more apt to learn. I'm not going to say humble, because the minute you say you're humble, you're not humble. So I'm not about to say that. So I'm just going to say I was more open-minded to listen to people. And one of the biggest things I learned, which is the hardest thing to grasp for me, is that we are all connected in the world. And that's a tough one to grasp. That means everybody in the world, ISIS, pedophiles, murderers, we're all connected, we're all unique and not different. The minute I read that, and I heard that on YouTube, and I started experiencing that oneness with the world, which I watched a lot of videos while I was out there on oneness, which was one of the big things I think I've learned. For me, was possibly the biggest thing that I could learn. That we're all the same. And I learned that right in the middle of the Baltimore incident. Whenever all that stuff was happening in Baltimore. Now granted, I was in the South. And I heard all the talk on the street, and everybody has their opinions, and I just sort of in a way, stay to myself and just, I sort of learned that, you got to accept people as they are in that exact moment. So, but for me, in that moment, I was all right. So let them be and let me be. Because, granted, I could go out on my blog, which I did, and try making a statement, but that statement wasn't working. So, and there's all kinds. For me, that was possibly the biggest thing I learned. The two things that I learned, well, the three things that I learned while living in a tent for 2 years was, 1, I'm alright now. 2, I'm content now. And 3, we're all interconnected in the world. All of us. Thank you for your time. And I'm about to post this on Twitter. Thank you.